a very significant change gradually happened. The cinema of Italy generally went into a horrible crisis. It was very difficult to get distribution. Even the big directors, the mainstream directors, highly respected directors, could not get films financed and made. There was always a problem with that. And of course, this was especially hard for the working directors, like the craftsmen like Fulci. The market was collapsing completely, and the only opportunity that arose gradually, actually two opportunities arose. On one hand, you had growth of home video market, especially in the United States, but in the English-speaking countries in particular. And at the same time, you had gradually everybody moving on TV in Italy. So you had these two extremes, and both are reflected in Fulci biography at this time. On one hand, you have people moving to television. Even the mainstream directors move to TV and make TV movies. Sometimes it would be soap operas, some kind of mini dramas, or the police procedurals. And others make direct-to-video movies, pretty much never intended to be shown in cinemas, hoping to sell them in American market. And that's what happened pretty much with Fulci. He played along with this trend. He made films that were aimed to satisfy the demand of this video market. His heart clearly was not in it. And you can feel it in his films that there is no clear interest, there is no clear vision. It's more like, okay, we made it, let's move on. Of course, we should not forget that he had emotional problems, psychological problems at the time. He felt sick, and he generally always was been quite abrasive. He often made films that were shorter than was required. Producers, famously on Zombie 3, there was this argument with producers when he delivered much less material than producers expected. Usually there is opposite. Directors and producers argue about the length of the film, but it's mostly directors insisting that they want more and producers insisting that they need less. But in this case, it was opposite. Fulci simply wouldn't provide enough material. My point is that Fulci, unlike Dario Argento, who only once made a film outside of his genre, it was only once he tried to do mainstream movie, historical comedy. It did not work. He was criticized, and he never again attempted. He locked himself in that genre that was between proper giallo and more traditional horror movie, and that's what it was. Fulci was never like that. Fulci was forced to play along simply because there was no other choice. By the end of the 80s, the only films that sold were the films that sold on this home video market or on TV. And only the films that he was asked to do was this type of horror movies that capitalized on his success of the early 80s. And this early 80s success came through this video nasty, this home video thing that grew in the Western world, in the English-speaking world, actually. So they started interviewing him, they started visiting him, they started writing about him in this narrow, specialized kind of magazines and world. And he had to play along because that was the only people who cared about him. Mainstream critics, mainstream audience did not care about him and did not even remember him. So his only chance to stay relevant was to play along. If for some reasons, that's my argument, if for some reason in the late 80s, early 70s, there would be a new boom of spaghetti westerns, and somebody remembered, oh, Fulci made spaghetti westerns, and people asked him, okay, when you will do next spaghetti western, and somebody gives him money to do it, he would do it. Of course he would. But the audience and these Gore fans wanted horror. Not because all of the audience wanted horror, not all that everybody was fine, but that was only fans he was left. Old films were forgotten and shelved, and this was the only people who relatively cared about him, so he tried to play along. In a way, you can compare it in a very remote way to Tinto Brass. Tinto Brass used to be a popular Italian filmmaker. Initially, he was hailed as, the new generation future of Italian cinema, possibly Italian answer to Godard and so on. So on. He never managed to capitalize and, let's say, follow up of his first success of his first film. He gradually descended into commercial cinema, trying to play along whatever genre was possible. Eventually started making big budget erotic extravaganzas like Caligula in the 70s. And in the 80s, he found himself. He started doing erotic movies, well-budgeted erotic movies with good market, good sales, following, and he positioned himself with this cigar-toting artist with this, babes around him. The question is whether he was always like that or he was simply forced to capitalize on whatever sold. That's 50-50. In case of Fulci, he did not have even that luxury to decide whether he wanted to make those erotic films or not. In this case, he simply was forced to play along with those who liked these Gore movies. And unlike Mr. Brass, who pretty much consistently produced same type of erotic movies since mid-80s till very recent years, Fulci he feels like he's disappointed in what he is asked to do. Whatever he says about the budget, about the actors, or about, there is a certain inherent sloppiness in his last films that simply, to me, say that his heart was not in it. He knew that this was not that good of material, and he was just doing it as a way to pay the bills. You don't have the feeling with his last films, unlike, for instance, with Dario Argento's Dracula, for instance. Dracula is disaster, but you can feel, I'm sure that Mr. Argento was sure he was making a great film. This is a guy who does not watch many new films, so he has no idea what is real 3D. So he thought that the 3D that he had envisaged in them was really cool. It was not. But he thought it was cool. He thought that these effects and this kind of jump scares were cool. It's not like he was just, cashing in or something. No, he genuinely believed that he was making something that would impress people, and he was surprised when people were not. In case of Fulci, I don't have that feeling. In case of Fulci, I have the feeling that he never believed that any of his last films would be highly regarded. It was more like, okay, you want this, I'll do it. And you can feel it on the screen. Yes, maybe if somebody offered him good budget, good story, opportunity to hire good stars, he would do something totally different. But we will never know. But what I know for sure is that we cannot judge an artist based on a tiny fraction of his artistic output. We should remember that Fulci made different films. He had different inspirations. He had different aspirations and different ambitions. Why I will finish this video not with giallo, not with a horror film, but with a scene from one of his earliest musical comedies. This is also Fulci, and we should remember that.
Nessuno, ti giuro, nessuno